going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing a complete hero guide for one of my personal favourite heroes to use in Star Wars Battlefront 2, that being Bossk. In these hero guides we're going to be covering everything that could possibly need, covering from base stats, ability stats, the best star cards for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, as well as some of the best maps to choose them on, some general tips for those game modes, the best star cards for Heroes vs Villains and Hero Showdown, which enemy characters you need to look out for, and then lastly covering some general tips for the hero game modes as well. So as you can see, this guide is going to be breaking down every single aspect of the hero. If you're new around here and you end up enjoying this video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Battlefront 2 content, and be sure to hit that notification bell as well so that you are notified each time I upload more videos like this going forward. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get stuck right into it. So starting off with Bossk's base stats, and his stats are very up and down, to be honest, having some terrible stats in some areas and then some of the best stats in other areas. Starting off with his base HP, he has 600, which is the equal lowest in the entire game. However, as for how much health he can regenerate at once, well, he can actually regenerate all of his health, assuming you aren't dead obviously, which is completely unique to him. In terms of his Ralby V10's damage, this is where the stats get even weirder. The blaster has two fire modes, those being hip fire and aimed. Hip fire just deals the exact same damage no matter where you hit the enemy, so if you land a headshot it doesn't actually do more damage, but it does actually stagger the enemy. The hip fire deals 45 damage at long range to both the body and the head, and then 126 damage up close. As for the scoped fire though, this does do more damage to the head, but it has no damage drop off whatsoever at range, so it deals 156 damage to the body at any range and a whopping 296 damage to the head at any range. But keep in mind, this is when it's fully charged. There's no point shooting when it's not fully charged, so I didn't even bother to actually test those stats, since yeah, there's literally just no point in shooting without charging it unless the enemy is just on like 1 HP. Now if you guys don't know what I mean by charging it, the little circle indicator around the reticle slowly moves up, and when the reticle is fully enclosed by the circle, that means it is fully charged, but you can still shoot it at any point before that. It just deals far less damage, so like I said, you should honestly never really need to do that. Now his rate of fire works out to be exactly 100 shots per minute, which is definitely on the slower side, although it's actually faster than what I expected, to be honest, and since he deals so much damage it does make a lot of sense. He can only fire 8 shots before the weapon will need to cool down, which I believe is the worst of any blaster hero alongside Han. However, its cooldown is pretty fast, so it's not really as bad as it seems. As for the spread, in the hip fire mode I'd probably classify it as medium, although it's not really that bad. It spreads out fairly evenly between those two marks of the reticle, but in saying that, the reticle is actually pretty small, so I know a lot of people say they struggle to aim it, but in reality it's actually fairly accurate considering it does have similar traits to a shotgun. Now moving on to his abilities, and this is where Bossk goes from honestly being a kind of shitty hero to one of the better heroes, at least for crowd control anyway. His left ability is the Dioxis grenade, and this one causes him to throw a grenade that spews out deadly gas, damaging anyone within the cloud. It deals roughly 17 damage per second, which leads to a maximum of 118 damage if the enemies are in it for its entirety, which is around 7 seconds of active time. It has a 20-second cooldown, which is pretty decent honestly. It's a really strong and really useful ability, so the 20-second cooldown is not too bad at all. Moving on, we have his middle ability, which is called Predator Instincts, and this one causes Bossk to gain thermal vision as well as firing micro grenades from his Ralby V10. The ability lasts for 8.5 seconds if you fire all of your grenades as fast as possible, or 25 seconds if you just activate it and then let it run out, and each shot deals about 40 to 80 damage depending on how far away the explosive is when it goes off. This one has a 25-second cooldown, which is definitely on the longer side for most cooldowns in the game. However, this ability is probably one of the best abilities in the game, so that is definitely fair enough. Now for his right ability, we have the proximity mines, and these are small mines that Bossk can throw down, dealing damage when an enemy triggers them by coming too close. They deal 76 damage per mine, and without star cards he throws down 3, meaning it can deal about 278 damage if an enemy triggers it and stays close to the explosions. However, they do take 4 seconds to activate after you throw them down, so they don't go off instantly if you've only just put them on the ground. It has a 20-second cooldown, which again is pretty much what you would expect for an ability as good as this one. So that is it for all of his base stats and abilities, and now we're going to move on to some tips for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, starting off with his best star cards. Keep in mind these cards are just a matter of opinion. There aren't really any loadouts in the game that are objectively the best or anything like that, but these are just what I find to work best in these modes. The first card I'd recommend is the Ultimate Predator star card, and this one makes it so that each time you get a kill with Predator Predator Instincts, you actually extend the duration of the ability by up to 30%. Like I said earlier, this ability is really solid, and if you can fire these off into a hallway and pull off some big multi-kills, then the ability is going to feel like it lasts forever. The second card I'd recommend is the Predator Resilience card, and this one gives you up to 20% damage reduction while Predator Instincts is active, which, considering how low his health pool is, it's definitely very useful to just keep you alive, and it does allow you to play much more aggressively while the ability is active, meaning generally you can get even more kills with it. The third card I'd recommend is the Unrelenting Predator card, and this one makes it so that each kill you get with Predator Instincts actually shortens the recharge time for all of your other abilities by up to 14%, so if you can even get 2 kills with this ability, that'll wipe roughly 5 seconds off the cooldown for your other 2 abilities, which is super helpful considering how strong those abilities are, and this allows you to really loop these abilities and almost always have one ready, which is pivotal for getting high kill games with Bossk. Now, I know a lot of people will be confused as to why I use all 3 Predator Instincts cards rather than spreading the cards between his other abilities, but these 3 just work the best for me, and since his Dioxis and Proximity Mines are already decent on their own, going all in on one ability just really buffs that ability so much and makes it so much better overall, without wasting the cards and making the other abilities feel weak. If you don't want to use all 3 for Predator Instincts though, then the Trap Arming Speed is another solid card to use in these modes, as it can allow those mines to blow up only 2 seconds after deploying them, turning them into essentially just grenades that you throw at your feet. And so if you do find yourself dying to enemies who are getting close a bit too easily, then this is definitely another great card to choose from, and honestly all 9 of Bossk's cards are solid, which really can't be said about anyone else in the game. Now, moving on to the best maps to choose him on in Galactic Assault, the 3 maps that I personally think he's the best on are Jakku, Crate and Naboo. Jakku and Crate are both maps that can be hard to play as pretty much any other hero, however Bossk can handle those maps really well because of all the choke points, which obviously just suit his playstyle, and then the same goes for Naboo as well. That second and third phase of the map especially are just built for crowd control characters like Bossk, but to be honest, he's one of the very few heroes in the game that can do really well regardless of the map, since he has all ranges covered. Now, moving on to some general tips for Galactic Assault and Supremacy, and like I mentioned, Bossk is a seriously well-rounded hero compared to most others in the game. He's not necessarily the best in any one area of the game, but he's generally pretty decent no matter what situation you find yourself in. If you're in close quarters, his Dioxis, Grenade Launcher and Proximity Mines keep you really well covered and allow you to be borderline dominant in those types of gunfights, and the Thermal Vision on his Predator Instincts ability also gives you amazing situational awareness and allows you to really scope out the area and not get caught off guard if you are paying attention to your surroundings. On the flip side of that, however, his Ralby V10 is also dominant at range as well, being essentially the highest damage sniper in the game, and so if you're not really able to get up on those front lines and use those abilities to your advantage, then you can still just play it slow for a while and pick enemies off with those scoped shots. So he honestly doesn't really have many weaknesses when you think about it like that. I'd say that the sort of mid-range engagements are where he's mostly the weakest. That sort of awkward range where it's a bit too close for his sniper but a bit too far for his abilities, that's really the only range of engagement that I find myself getting a bit panicky in, because he does lack a little bit of firepower in that regard, but that can generally be countered by just your own self-awareness. If you're in that range and you're not able to do very well, then you can simply just fall back and use his sniper a bit more effectively, or you can just full send it and get closer to your enemies and make the most of those abilities. So even though that middle range is definitely his weakest area, luckily that can be dictated by your own decisions more often than not. Other than that, there really isn't too much more to say for Bossk, if I'm honest. To summarize, it's just as simple as using the sniper at range or using his abilities as much as possible at close range, and then it just comes down to playtime and practice to get used to the areas where you should be getting through on each map. So now moving on to the hero vs villain game modes, and despite being a really useful character in the trooper modes, he is definitely a little bit harder to use in these modes. Starting off with his star cards, and the first card that I'd recommend is the Predator Resilience card that I mentioned earlier. That 20% damage reduction really helps considering your health is obviously lower than literally everyone else in the game, so use this card to your advantage. The second card I'd recommend is the Trap Arming Speed that I mentioned earlier as well. If a bunch of heroes are pushing you, then that 2-second faster activation time on the mines can be a lifesaver, especially with the following card as well. The third card I'd recommend is the Multi-Traps card, and this one makes it so that you can actually throw down 2 more mines, taking it to a total of 5 mines for a maximum of 380 damage if all 5 mines hit the enemy. Between your other abilities and your blaster, as well as the fact that he has a better jump than all of the other blaster heroes, if you're quick enough on your feet, then that 380 damage can get an enemy down to half health, and at that point you should be able to beat pretty much any blaster hero that's within range of you. So those 3 cards are definitely some of the best to use in tandem in my opinion. Now, as for the heroes that you need to look out for, the 3 that I've put here are Anik, Anakin, Luke, and Han Solo. Anakin will just ragdoll the hell out of you, and that can often disrupt your abilities and stop you from regenerating health, so he's definitely the biggest pest in the game for Bossk. Luke, well, he's Luke, he'll just spam the shit out of you until you're dead, and then Han is a really solid counter to Bossk in that mid-range that we were talking about earlier, so definitely keep an eye out for Han as well. Now, finally moving on to just some regular tips for the hero game modes, and really his playstyle is pretty similar to the trooper modes, however probably just a little bit less aggressive and a little bit more team oriented as well. I'll be honest, you do have to be pretty decent to be able to 1v1 saber heroes with Bossk. It's not super hard or anything, but just one small slip up can have you dead in a matter of seconds, and so Bossk definitely thrives when he's with a teammate or two and they can take a little bit of the heat off, letting him deal passive damage to the enemy while they're distracted. Your mines and the Dioxis grenade can be amazing at sort of dictating where the enemies go. They'll either have to avoid those abilities or just opt to take the damage from them, so you can kind of put the ball in their court by making the most of those abilities to cut off areas of the map while your health regens. His Predator Instincts ability is also really dominant if you're shooting it at multiple enemies at once, since it can damage more than one person obviously, so it's always great to try and use that as more of a crowd control ability. However, it is still great to use in a 1v1 as well. The last thing that I'll mention is that Bossk is the type of character that you're just going to get a heap of assists with rather than kills. He's constantly dealing damage, but he's also not quite dealing it fast enough to just flat out obliterate the enemy team, so don't feel bad at all if you only get 5 kills in the game, because you likely will still come first with how many assists you're going to get on top of that. To summarize, make the most of your abilities and try to use them in the right situations rather than just sort of spamming them all at once. So use the mines and the Dioxis to sort of deal passive damage, but also to dictate where the enemies go, and then also be ready to play more of a team role and just sort of help get as many kills and deal as much damage as possible. He's not the type of hero to sort of carry the team most of the time, but his input can still control the outcome if you're dealing a ton of damage and helping your teammates have an easier game. So that is going to do it for this Bossk hero guide, guys. We are getting towards the tail end of this series with only a handful of heroes left to cover, so I'm definitely excited to keep on pumping these out over the next few weeks and months. If you did enjoy the video and it did help you out, then be sure to leave a like down below to support the channel, and be sure to subscribe with those notifications on so you don't miss out on any more Star Wars Battlefront 2 content. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.
Crush them! Make them suffer!